Alright guys, how you doing? So this is take 5, right? I recently saw in the last couple hours that Brad Jones, the cinema snob, had put up a video talking about an upcoming Roe V Wade movie. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about Roe V Wade. But I realized as I got into it and tried over and over to talk about this subject that it's very hard to explain my take on it without it's just a complicated issue. And the bigger problem is that nowadays the arguments that people are making on both sides of this really have nothing to do with the issues that are in play in the actual Supreme Court decision. So what I'm going to do for you instead is explain the majority decision in Roe v. Wade, explain what the actual issues that they were discussing were, and you can go from there and make your own decision on how you feel about it. So at the end of the day, the legal issues in play in Roe v. Wade and the legal issues for and against that the justices made their decision on are as follows, right? The justices had to consider the rights of the state or the interests of the state in protecting the health of the mother and the life of the fetus. Now, it was the decision of the majority, Roe v. Wade was a 7-9 decision, that a balance needed to be struck between these rights of the state to protect these interests against the mother's rights under the 14th Amendment, which prohibits a state from restricting a person's liberties without due process of law. Now, it was decided that abortion in and of itself is not a fundamental right. However, by regulating this or preventing a mother from making this medical decision, the state was infringing on the mother's fundamental right to privacy. Fundamental rights is an important term to consider here. What that means is that they are rights that you are guaranteed by the Constitution, by the government. So, for example, nowhere in the Constitution does it guarantee you the right to a certain medical procedure, and that's why that is not a fundamental right. Further muddling the waters here is the argument that, remember we talked about the state's right to protect its interests in the protection of the unborn child, right? So further muddling the waters here was the decision of whether or not the unborn child has the full rights of a person, right? Because that changes how much weight that individual's protection has in the eyes of the law. And the decision was made that legally the definition of person does not cover the unborn, which legally makes sense. Morally, that's another topic that we could talk about for days, and one of the reasons that this gets so confusing, because people are confusing moral and legal, right? Those are not the same thing. But legally, it makes sense that a person only exists when they're born, given a social security number and an identification, and legally become a person. Now, in weighing these states' right to protect their interest, again, in the health of the mother and the unborn child, versus the mother's right to privacy, the decision was made in order to balance these two factors, that the state's rights became more compelling once the second trimester was reached. Because, for two reasons. First off, because the danger to the mother increases, and therefore the state's interest in protecting that mother's health becomes more compelling. And also because as the fetus becomes more developed, again, the state's rights to protect to protect their interests in that individual, again, become more compelling. So the majority decision, which was written by Justice Blackmun, decided that that was the tipping point. Basically, that the mother's right to privacy outweighed the state's rights to create a law infringing on her rights in order to protect their interests until the end of the first trimester, at which point the state's interests became greater than the right of the mother to privacy, again, according to the Supreme Court decision. So, all that being said, what are some things that people commonly are arguing on both sides of this that are not actually part of this decision and don't actually have any weight as far as the law is concerned? First off, the right of the mother to a particular medical procedure, right? A particular medical decision. It's not actually an issue at play here. Again, it's the mother's right to privacy and the 14th Amendment restricting a state or preventing a state from restricting a person's right without due process that actually is protecting the woman's rights in this case. On the other side of that, all arguments regarding when a fetus does this, when a fetus heart starts, when a fetus can feel pain, etc., are irrelevant in the eyes of the law here. Because in the decision, the justices state that their decision is based on the fact that in the eyes of the law, a person is defined at the point of birth, right? Now, I want to talk really quick about the dissenting opinions. Some people may not know this, but in any Supreme Court case where it's not a unanimous decision, the justices who are on the losing side, who in this case were Justices White and Rehnquist, with Rehnquist actually doing the writing of the opinion, still have to write their legal opinions, right? What made them decide to vote against the majority, right? So the actual arguments here that are in play against this decision, again, written by Justice Rehnquist in the majority opinion in Roe v. Wade, were that the 14th Amendment did not actually guarantee an individual's right to privacy and was never intended to guarantee a mother's right to have an abortion. He did state that, if anything, a right to privacy would fall under the Fourth Amendment, which is the amendment which governs unlawful searches and seizures. And he concluded that, and this is my honest opinion regarding this decision, right? He concluded that since this decision requires a balancing of the rights of the state and the rights of the mother, it is therefore not the purview of the federal government, and actually was a law that should be governed on the state level. And I just really quick want to touch on that, because my personal opinion is this. My issue with Roe v. Wade is not a fundamental Christian issue or a moral issue. My moral stance on abortion has nothing to do with the law, nor does yours, nor does anybody else's. I would be just as opposed to Roe v. Wade had they decided that on a federal level abortion should be illegal, right? Had they made, obviously that wasn't the issue at play in Roe v. Wade, but had there been a Supreme Court decision from the federal government outlawing abortion unilaterally across all 50 states, I would be just as opposed to that decision. I believe that the federal government was created in such a way that it would help prevent the tyranny that our founding fathers were trying to break away from when they created this country. And I believe that the federal government should, as little as possible, impede the rights of the states to govern themselves and the rights of the people in their day-to-day life. On a somewhat related note, this is why I'm not really very happy with our current government, our current regime right now. Because over the last few months, they've been making a ton of laws, raising the legal age for buying tobacco products, which now is 3 years higher than the age at which I went into the military, and is higher than the age at which I entered a war zone for the government, right? So now, were that to happen today, I would be old enough to die for the government, but not old enough to buy tobacco products, according to our current government, right? That kind of stuff upsets me. That's not the purview of the federal government. The federal government should never, unless it's a dire emergency and everything is foobarred and only the federal government can step in and regulate things, ever be making restrictions and impeding the rights of the states, the local governments, and the individuals. That's just how our government was intended to work. But again, I did my best to explain everything here in a simple way that didn't lean one way or another, with the exception of my personal opinion at the end. So make your own decision. But I just want everybody to know what the actual legal issues at play here are. So I hope this helped you out. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video, and peace.